Alaska, Grim After Dark, starring John and Danny.
Curtain is up. That's right. It's Grim After Dark. It's Val Heffelfinger. I am hosting, and I am producing, and I'm wearing the best looking sweater on YouTube this evening. I hope everyone's having a wonderful time. Hope our tummies aren't too stressed out and full after Thanksgiving in America. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, or as I like to say, the celebration of the conquest. So let's quickly just do a couple things in the intro. Usually John has something written. Now he is unfortunately sick this week. So John's away, and Danny and Val will play. Get your fantasy reference counters out, because tonight's episode has been hijacked, and I will personally make it my mission to have you all begging for the end times by the time I am through. Few people are more irritable than me. I am Val Heffelfinger, and although I'm not John, it's still going to get pretty grim after dark. Now, before we bring out our co-host for my personal YouTube fantasy, I would like to take a moment to spill the beans that this Friday, that's right, this Friday, not next Friday, tickets go live for the Frontline Gaming Rocky Mountain Open. That's right, it's the inaugural Frontline Gaming Rocky Mountain Open. It is the first ever cold certified tabletop gaming spectacular. The event will be held just outside of Denver at the Adams County Fairgrounds, making it the second Frontline Gaming event to be held at a fairgrounds. Surrounded by beautiful Colorado scenery, most notably mountains. All are invited to join and spend a weekend rolling dice with awesome people. So long as you pony up for a ticket, no one rides for free. There will be championship level tournaments for 40K, Age of Sigmar, and Star Wars Legion. We're still looking for a Warhammer Fantasy 8th Edition TO, though. Now, Bill Pang is done with. I will now introduce my first co-host today, our classic high hairline Harry himself. It's probably Danny McDevitt, once I can find the button to introduce the co-host. Boom! Okay, we're going away, and maybe this is music? No, I'm too late with the music. Hey, Danny, what's going on?
Hey, Val. How are you doing tonight?
You know, I am spectacular. I'm feeling great. It looks like your audio's even on.
Shocking.
Shocking indeed. What's happening? Something special? Anything different tonight? How do you like my sweater?
While the cat's away, the mice will play, like you said a little earlier. I can tell that you are ready and willing to go back in time after looking at that sweater. We're ready to talk about some Warhammer Fantasy today, I guess. Is that what we're doing? Is that what's happening? Are we talking about 40K at all?
I mean, I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, if we were going to derail a 40K themed show, and instead talk about Warhammer Fantasy, we should probably get perhaps the best, most outspoken, just verbose and over the top Warhammer 40K analyst out here, just to give us a little bit of gravitas and, dare I say, credibility. That's right, everybody. It's Adam Camilleri coming along, coming right down the pipe. Adam Camilleri, who is this masked man? How are you, buddy?
Very good, boys. How you doing? Did you heard about this guy? I don't know if you hear about him. His name's Grimgor Ironhide. He's right there. It's a bit of a mad dog. I don't know. I've just been perusing a bit of the ancient texts, as I like to call them.
Is he new?
I think he must be new.
Okay.
It's a new character. It's fantastic.
I envision him punching someone in the face to end a global campaign in a very unauspicious manner that was built up over many, many years.
As I like to say, if I've never heard it, it's news to me, folks. That's wonderful. Now, Adam Camilleri, I'm not sure if you're aware of the state of the Warhammer Fantasy 8th Edition podcasting meta right now, but it has to include Australians. In fact, they are basically all our Australian shows. So that is really the real reason you're here tonight.
I am the demographic. I'm using me to try and get leverage on the target audience. I see how it is.
You're the honeypot, Adam.
It's not my
That's
love
right.
and effervescent passion for this great game.
Now, I have a quick Australian-related question here. Is the reason why Australians still play so much Warhammer Fantasy that they can't afford to replace any of their armies?
just to preempt you, absolutely right, correct. We have over a standard calendar year, or hell, the gross income of a lifetime in Australia, we can afford exactly one full-sized army of a game system. And some
Yes.
people that was fantasy. Something. Me, I've decided to sell. I've stopped smoking. I stopped drinking. 12 years ago, I gave up all vices for the express purpose of selling as many organs as possible in order to play 2 game systems, which is just necessary over here. Yeah,
that's unheard of. You are the 1% in Australia, it appears. Yeah. That's fantastic. So, in honor of our late great host, Jonathan Quennell, I thought I would ask. I would use questions that are prepared. I've got maybe 4 or 5 of them. But my first question I'm going to throw out to you guys: are we actually going to spend an hour talking about Warhammer Fantasy 8th Edition tonight?
I mean, how long's a piece of string? If the show goes 2 hours, I can give you. We can go 2 hours, right?
Yeah. I mean, we can keep going and going and going. You're looking at the literal Southern Hemisphere Energizer Bunny over here, the fastest mouth in the West, and me. So that probably evens out to be about an hour of good content.
I think so. As a man, oof. When they told me I was going to be on this show, they heard some wild noises as I ran through my garage and found props, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not watching this live visually, you are missing out on so much memery, chicanery, absolute tomfoolery, even from yours truly. I got all sorts of crap down here. Stay tuned.
You guys, all I heard was it sounded like a lot of zipper noises. It was really uncomfortable for Val and I, sitting here without any kind of visual. He just left, and then we hear, I don't know. It was very odd.
Fantasy is in the name of the game. So, we're not going to shame any kinks here, guys. There's a reason why we're nipples up on the FLGN. We don't even want to go. We don't want to risk belly button. We want to be tits up at all times.
Yep.
Now, I'm even going to I'm going to bring in maybe even some slideshows that were hastily thrown together. And maybe this is something that the audience might be thinking right now. This is, of course, just an image that says "Why" in front of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Danny, as you are our esteemed co-host of the show, why don't we throw this out to you? Why Warhammer Fantasy?
Why play Warhammer Fantasy? I'll tell you. There's so many reasons.
This is an open question, man. It's a talk show. Just why?
Have you ever played a game and been so concerned with a 90-degree angle that you have literally bought a tool just to measure 90-degree angles from your unit when you can just fold a piece of paper? But no, you went and bought a widget. If you've done something like that, this is absolutely the game for you. Never have you been so anal as to correct your opponent's wheel multiple times. If you've ever done that, this is the game for you. So basically what I'm saying is that if you have a borderline personality disorder, this is the game for you.
Yes.
Now, I just want to point everyone listening. I want to point out to everyone listening that Adam just raised a box there that is not actually the fortified manor, but I missed that when it was sold without the fortified parts of the manor. Mm-hmm. What house were we looking at there? Perhaps you could raise it up for the audience once more. It's upside down. There you go.
This is the chapel.
Lovely little chapel. Lovely little chapel. That's right.
Capella, in whatever language that is.
Chapella. Hey.
Beautiful. I have rumbled with a fair few Death Stars in this very dwelling. Yeah. Or many like it upon, battlefields.
It's the Warrior Priest VRBO. You love to see it. When they want to get away from the fortified manor, they had to the small chapel.
And yet, I will point out to you that the instructions are for the entire fortified manor.
Fortified manor.
Wow.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And the chapel consists of merely maybe a third of said structure.
My goodness.
Much like a high-end abattoir, GW does not let any morsel go to waste. There is no fat left on the bone. All parts of the plastic animal are carved up and served in different dishes for your taste. and that's fantastic. That's why we love it. Now, boys, a quick follow-up question here. Now, how badly do you want to play fantasy like right now?
On a scale of 1 to 7, I am a 4.5.
Mm-hmm. Out of 8 would be better. I think more typical.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you got what you got.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now,
I can't imagine a scale going longer than 7. To be honest with you.
Why would you bother? I mean, what
It's
exists past 7? That's worth knowing. Right?
It's a bit presumptuous. Why go beyond 7? I don't even know.
It seems like a waste.
The follow-up question would be like, if you both have enthusiasm for this quote for this game, why did you stop playing? Did something happen?
First of all, I'd like to talk about those subtorial stalkers right there. Yeah.
These old things? Oh, don't worry about them. They've just been kicking around in my garage for literally almost.
Are those sealed, new in box?
Brand new, still in the shrink wrap, boys.
Oh my gosh!
Ooh. I could almost buy a car.
Yeah, pretty much, actually.
Which is these bad boys. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure people who have a car in Australia actually say, I could buy a Tomb King's army.
Yes, that's right. We don't have... So, in Australia, you may have heard things... I don't know what happens in the States or Canada, but like superannuation, like retirement funds. I decided to eschew all that and just putting, instead of like gold bullion or diamonds, straight into Tomb King new in box kits.
The polystyrene portfolio pays off once again.
The hierarchy of sand-based investment strategies. I think you got your NFTs, your crypto, and you got your new in-box out of print Warhammer Fantasy kits. What could go wrong? That is a lock. That is a sound market.
Basically, it's foolproof.
Deep pockets right here, guys.
You better hope you don't cause some kind of a car accident and you're at fault, because they'll be coming straight for your assets.
That's right. They are not. Yeah, they're not sheltered under any limited liability clauses. Out of print Warhammer Fantasy Battles kits in Australia, fully liable for those.
You should have sent those to the Bahamas.
I know. I was considering it really should have. I mean, I'm gonna have some capital gains tax and all sorts of issues to jump through when I try and pay out.
Excellent work, fellas.
A glass of water.
Well, I don't know why John's never done it. I'm trying to find. I gotta find it. There we go.
Oh Jesus!
I'm drinking that fantasy Kool-Aid, boys. That's what I'm doing. Okay, look, let's stop.
There we go. That was a joke there. Sweet.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's not beat around any bushes here. I just want to ask you guys.
That's difficult terrain, Val. You're going to have to pay double movement to get through there.
Yeah. And I better pray to God I'm not riding my chariot that day, folks.
Yeah,
Little inside baseball humor, guys.
Yeah.
That's D6 wounds on a failed test. You don't want to be caught in a wood in a chariot, boys.
Or any lady. Of you, what's the guy from Planet of the Apes? Charlton Heston? Mm-hmm. When the end of fantasy actually died and you saw the rules of what Age of Sigmar first edition was going to be, did you fall to your knees as in the end of the original Planet of the Apes? You maniacs, you blew it up. Yeah, anybody else do it? I was just picturing a tidal wave of that across the globe occurring when we found out we would have to be braying like goats in order to get our buffs. It was insulting.
I'm not gonna lie. The very last fantasy tournament that I went to, I went to Quake City Rumble, which was a 100-person tournament in at the very end of 8th, and it was like an Irish wake. A lot of drinking, a lot of people very sad. No. They knew the Sigmarization was coming, and it was not going to be good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I've been, of course, on a bit of a Warhammer Fantasy kick for the past year plus, and as a result, I have drunk the ocean of remaining content dry that's out there. I'm talking about Krusty Podcast dating from 2012.
Wow.
till the 2015 era, and then just suddenly they stop. I'm not really sure what happened there. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part of listening to old Warhammer Fantasy podcasts is the hopeful and whimsical tones that people have in looking forward to what would be 9th edition, and knowing the end was indeed nigh, and that all of their dreams would be shattered.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So
bittersweet.
I only played. So I played a lot of Fantasy 8th edition, but I only started into the competitive scene in the last like 12 months of it.
Oh, wow.
I was at my
Oh,
local
man,
local. I know my local FLGS walked up to me after I'd won like my 21st game in a row, pickup game, and it was just like, I think it's time you moved on, mate. There's some ponds out there that you need to also go be enjoying. And
I
the
like that, by the
last-
way, 8th edition fantasy skill flex that you just made.
Dude,
That was
I was.
excellent.
If I am any good at Warhammer 40k, I was hopefully as good, if not better, at fantasy, and that's hopefully not a flex. It's just saying I put a lot of freaking time and effort into that game. I loved it so much.
Yep.
And the last major, so it was about I think it was at 80, 90 players. The last event of Warhammer Fantasy, it was the first event I ever won in Australia.
Man.
And before that, I had about a 6-month period of being a perpetual podium getter, not a first place getter. And the very first place I got was the last major. And so I've spent all this time being like, what if I just started a year earlier? What if fantasy didn't die? Where could I go? So yeah,
What might have been.
unfinished business is where I'm at right now.
Big
Okay,
sad.
well let's maybe get into a little bit more of Adam's show and tell right now is out of control. What do we have? I'm just gonna go zoom in here. Looks like we're at the centerfold of all Warhammer Army books. Usually has quite a delicious spread, if you will, of miniatures. This being the ogres.
This is always my favorite page in every book. This was the one that just got you chubbed. Your hobby chub was just at full attention, just like, I need me some of this. And this was one of the main reasons I always wanted to have one of every unit. Even if they were trash tier horrible, like Yetis used to be. I still had 6 Yetis because I had to make this picture. It was the rules, man.
Fantasy, by the way, very collectible in comparison to 40k, because there's like 10 units in army. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, except for a handful of them. So let's maybe just do in honor of Carl Tuttle and my desire to in the near future create the independent characters of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I think we'll just call it characters,
Okay.
because that's what it would be in fantasy. Well, it's another fantasy joke there for all the kids at home. Hope you liked it.
I'm pretty sure Lords and Heroes is taken though, so don't.
Lords and
don't take
Heroes?
that one. Yeah.
I don't know.
I
It's not a right name,
wanna-
I guess.
I want to draw our attention to the most aptly
Yes.
and well-named character in all of every game ever. The old Golgfag Man-Eater. The biggest, the bestest, everyone's fan. Just the best. Just
Better than-
no tongue, nothing tongue-in-cheek, no allusions or any attributes at all. They were just like, just slap Golgfag Man-Eater right on that page.
Yeah. They don't have to
Proud
do
lad.
anything, man. He's got those petrified shark jaws.
Dude, he's a Man-Eater.
That's right.
This is Man-Eater.
Yeah.
Yes, a true dog of war, that Golfag. Love him. A dog of war, I should say.
Oh God. That's
Now,
bad.
guys, now people have probably been aware of my fantasy journey again, taking place approximately over the last year and a half, and you know they know where I've come from, where I'm going. I'm going into the great beyond. I'm taking this all the way. You can't stop this train. It's a gravy train with biscuit wheels. Maybe you guys could share maybe your fantasy love story. How did it begin? When did you first lay eyes on the squared squares of a fantasy? Well, they're like squares in a square. You got movement trays. I mean, and let me tell you guys,
Eventually,
the pleasure
man, that
of
was,
shoving a movement tray around after schlepping your whole tabletop life, moving around all these round bases, keeping coherency, blah, 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 blah. No, just move it all on one big tray. You don't even have to stand up to play fantasy. Danny,
Yeah,
what was the
if
first
you,
thing that you laid eyes on?
Imagine if you played Fantasy for the first time and didn't know what a movement tray was. That was my first edition. That was my first experience playing Warhammer Fantasy. But my first experience like getting into it. So I walk in the hobby shop under the glass counter because these $20 tomes were worth so much more than the other books apparently at this shop. Where all the Warhammer Fantasy army books like turned face up so you can see the artwork. And the artwork on these like 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy books was so cool. And I like knew I needed to get into it. And so my friend and I would buy the catalog, the Citadel catalog, and we'd like go through and circle all the units that we wanted. And we're like, 12 years old or whatever at this point in time. And so, that was my first introduction. I couldn't get enough of it after that. It was like the first war game I ever played.
Amazing. I went into a Games Workshop when I don't know if I was 10 years old, and I begged my mum to buy me like a thing off the shelf. And we weren't probably well known by now. I didn't grow up in a very well off circumstances, and so I had to really beg my mum. She bought me a Space Marine Sergeant who had like one plastic arm. It was pewter but had a plastic arm. That's what I remember. Stuck it together with Araldite, instantly ruined it, and here we are. But I remember the first game I ever played was I walked into a Games Workshop and they had this big cliff with these two fleets. It was the Dark Elf Corsairs had just launched. And that whole range was coming out. They had the brand new plastic repeater bolt thrower, Dark Shards, and all that stuff. And it was an invasion of the High Elf lands, and they had these two little fleets, and they had this little battle going on in the middle. I can't remember what it was, but apparently it was a global campaign. And I think I was in my teens at this point. I'd stuffed around with my brothers, mashing Terminators together with our pocket money. And then I walked in. The first game I played was Fantasy, and first structured game that I actually played by the rules, and it was freaking cool as hell. I couldn't get enough of it. I played a little. I wasn't the guy. I remember when you go in and you'd play in a Games Workshop and you'd be like with 6 other dudes and you'd get this unit and they'd get this unit. And I was so salty at the guy who got the Dark Elf Lord on the Dragon. I was like, you piece of crap. You joker. You absolute nothing. Anyway, he like copped a bolt thrower to the face and died. And then I was sitting there with my Dark
guy
Shards.
or the
guy,
dragon?
The little guy. I don't know how I don't know how it works over there. But over here, yeah, I had like Dark Shards and a unit of Spearmen, and that was my 2 little units. And I survived the whole game. And I was like, this chump ass bolt thrower catching biatch. But anyway, so the first game I played, I believe, was Fantasy, and I fell in love with it then. It was for a lot of the same reasons. I found the artwork more evocative. I don't know why, but I feel like there's different slots inside people's souls, and my one fits better with a fantasy aesthetic than a sci-fi aesthetic. And for some reason, I've always just been drawn to that a little bit more than the sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think what sparked it was definitely COVID and like falling like just ass over tits into Warhammer Total War, Warhammer 2 Total War, Warhammer 2, whatever. There's war is in it twice. That's all I know, and it's an absolutely fantastic game if you guys haven't gotten into it. Also Vermintide 2, which you can buy for like no dollars right now on Steam. Adam is still continuing. Are those 2 battalion boxes?
Dear Lord.
One.
That's 2 battalion. That is college tuition in New York State right there.
You know how other people have like a bed of money. I have a bed of Tomb King new in box. I just jump and drive into it. Wow. And it scratches me up deliciously.
What comes in that box?
Well, Danny.
Adam.
You get Horsemen, which is just like the worst unit you could ever imagine. This unit right here, the worst unit in all of Fantasy.
What comes in that box that you would use?
The chariots are legit. Archers are always legit for actually everything apart from the horses you could use.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you can use light horsemen aren't like terrible.
Come on, Danny.
I mean, they're not terrible. I'm doing my best here.
Compared to everyone else's, they don't have fast cav. They're not even fast cav.
Yeah, the light ones are.
No, they're not, are they? I don't think they
the
were.
Ones
I thought
with
that
bows?
was like the biggest. Oh, you have to have them with the bows to get fast cav.
Yeah.
See? This is
Okay.
why you come here,
So-
guys. You get the real info from 10 years ago. You get 3 chariots, which are legit. Chariots are always good for
Chariots
Tomb
are
Kings.
good, yeah.
The archers are probably the bee's knees. Like, you would build your army around archers and Kalita because she'd make them broke, giving them poison. And you always needed bunkers. You always needed bunkers for your light councils or your hierophants. So regular ass tomb warriors were pretty decent.
So getting back to that whole immersion in the fantasy world of Warhammer Fantasy specifically and how it just appealed to you. What about from like a gaming perspective? Like, do you guys,
Oh,
well, if you were to compare, like, because 40K right now, from what I understand, a pretty good game. And I know when I left it, it was a pretty good game. It was, I've had amazing games of Warhammer 40K. Still an awesome game, obviously. You know, if you're into that kind of thing.
a game.
But if you were to compare sort of like your experiences of like 40K versus fantasy, how might you sort of parse that? How would you say that the games differ? Because mechanically, if you were to compare 40K, Fantasy 8th edition, I'd say it's clearly a cousin of what became Warhammer 6th edition and 7th edition, two of the clunkiest, worst rule sets, probably worst edited rule sets if we're being fair, in 40K. But like, how do you feel that those two games sort of differ?
Well,
because this game gets made fun of a lot, but I think it does get missed. That it's actually badass as hell. I have been having so much fun with this game and the way it plays, and I feel like everyone thinks it's dusty bullshit, but that might be. I'm dusty bullshit, sure, but let's not say that about Warhammer Fantasy. I got this sweater. Why am I having fun playing a game that's supposed to suck? That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Legitimately, Fantasy was the best rule set of any game I've ever played. And 8th edition still had so many problems. So many problems. Cannons, 6 dicing, broke-ass spells, stuff of that ilk was just... But still, you get to this beautiful... And when I joined the competitive game, like I said, I played Fantasy for about 4 years, but only competitive for about 1. When I got there, and I got to the top level of it in Australia, you got to this beautiful state of 1%ers, where the whole game would ride on 1%ers, because everyone had redirectors, everyone had that super sorcerer, everyone had a dispel scroll and cannons and all these things, and going first or going second, deployment mattered so freaking much.
Yep.
Your first turn was so pivotal to setting up your game, and then it was just down to 1%ers. Did you get Irresistible Force on that minor spell? Otherwise I was going to scroll it, which would have changed this pivotal battle 2 turns down the track, because I wouldn't have been able to pick up your fast cav with my Ruby Ring of Ruin and my little bolt throwers and whatnot. And then they were able to redirect the Death Star away, and you got me in the flank. The game's over, all because I couldn't dispel scroll that thing last turn. And it was just so it was an orchestra. Whereas I feel like a lot of the time with 40K, it's just coin flippy, rock paper scissorsy. Yeah.
Like sometimes going first super matters in Warhammer Fantasy. Usually, I guess it depends on which army you had, because some armies wanted the last turn to try and rally their troops.
Yeah.
But like stuff like Undead didn't really care about that, so they wanted to go second. And like it's kind of more of a linear game because your units are kind of on tracks. So it's hard once you've committed a unit to a particular place to kind of, unless they have some really good movement shenanigans, to like kind of reposition. So deployment, like Adam said, was incredibly important. So if you really liked that, like you set everything up perfectly because you know what your opponent's army does, you can almost kind of tell in the first kind of few opening movements of the game how it was going to go, which is kind of really rewarding for a really high skill cap game like Fantasy ended up being.
But at the same time, it scaled really well. Like at lower levels of play, it was just as much fun to just shove your boys forward and just mash it all in the middle. It was just great. It was a great time at every level. Like it was really, really rewarding. I found unlike 40K, Fantasy was really easy to gear down. I find a lot of players where you'll play a top level game of 40K and then you'll try and go play a pickup game and you'll just ruffle stomp little Timmy because it's much harder to gear down from top level 40K. Whereas Fantasy, man, I could just gear down into lols, potato and pretzels. Sorry, beer and pretzels. Well, I don't drink potato and pretzels. Enjoyment at the drop of a hat, drop of a dime. It was really, really quite something.
Yeah, that's actually something I've been noticing. Well, because obviously I'm reading tea leaves and trying to like it's like almost like an anthropology class and learning how to play a war game at the same time. Because I'm just going through trying to find out what people thought was good 7 years ago, whatever it was. So like, but even then, like just showing up with what you think is good also has been a lot of fun, I gotta say.
Well, and so I joined. I joined. I was playing ogres, which I got a little bit memed on. But I joined and started playing just as like I got about 2 months of overpowered ogres, and then high elves came out, and my shit didn't matter anymore. Which was really funny. But we had this cool period before the end times hit, where we had about 9 months of everyone just trying to figure out how to not lose to high elves, and it was a beautiful meta. We had Skaven lists coming out of nowhere. Vampire accounts figured out what their hotness is with like the Black Knight bus and the Red Thirst vampire lords and stuff, just charging that guy out by himself, no support, directly into the freaking the sword masters, because he was the only thing that would hold him in combat, because he wouldn't die instantly unless they had like Trickster's Shard or whatever. So you could play the rest of the game. Just those little plays was so freaking cool, seeing people dig up all this awesome tech. Then the Vampire Lord would hold them, so you get to sling out your 2 Terrorgeist and scream the bastards to death. It was been there. It was so nice.
I feel like I almost need to be translating everything that you're saying, and it makes me so happy that you haven't read anything about this for a very long time, and you are completely fluent in everything.
If you were to crack my chest, if you were to weave my chest open, the inside of my rib cage is just tattooed with this crap. You're playing ogres. Do not try and cannon off the Grey Seer first. Kill the Doom Wheel at him. Do not do not go for the Hell Pit Abomination, you dumbass. Go for the Doom Wheel every time. Yeah, that kind of stuff. It's
not only is it going to roll into you, but then those D6 damage lightnings are going to be a real pain in the dick.
Worst thing that happens is that 2 buses of 100 Skaven slaves or 50 charge you in the front, and then 1 Doom Wheel just sidles along the side of your bus, and it just freaking sits there. He's just like, I'm just gonna sit here, bung bung, bing 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 bing, and eventually you just break from freaking static combat res because of the 10 ranks on the Skaven buses.
Right, because they're not going to kill him fast enough.
We're
really
getting
depressing.
In the comments right now, we're getting requests to do a test stream at the LVO featuring Warhammer Fantasy. And you know what? This appeals to me only because, well, first of all, I don't know if anyone's seen me in lead up to a stream, but I'm in no condition to run a stream, let alone play fantasy. The thing that would be my favorite part of this would be we would have to prevent Games Workshop from taking the main stage at LVO, so that we could play our test game of Warhammer Fantasy. They could relegate their preview or whatever they're going to do to like some sort of sideshow room where it belongs.
Perfect.
While the main stage is held by Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. I think that's poetic justice if I ever heard it before.
I thought you were suggesting that like G-Dub execs would get on the phone and they'd get some heavies to come in and like break down our fantasy stream, being like, "Get it out of here,
smash them, boys!"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I didn't get this rich from cashing checks, like, you know. And some heavies come and bust up our table, put some round bases on our models, and leave.
Oh man, just break off the square bases, like, you know, just kind of fold them in half.
They all have nail files. They just squirt in a circle them.
Yeah, snap all your movement trays. You won't be needing these.
So we said the word of the day, Games Workshop. I love, one of my favorite things is, of course, talking about the company itself. There's been, I saw a comment in chat here that said this is one of my favorite thought experiments around fantasy. So I'm going to throw up a meme here. More people interested in Warhammer Fantasy than any other time ever. Stop selling Warhammer Fantasy. And it's the toothy grinned guy, brace face meme that millennials enjoy, and the kids probably think this person's old. Go ahead.
It still burns me to my core that G-Dub followed through with the end times and the deletion of the game with Total War on the horizon. So surely one of my favorite things. Wait and see. One of my favorite things. It's been unprofitable for years. Let's just wait another 12 months.
As part of Val Heffelfinger's Warhammer Fantasy Battles podcast network, I think I'm going to go with Heffelhammer. It's an homage to another thing. But anyway, I digress. Part of it is a series of shows called Who Killed Warhammer Fantasy. And this is one that I think might be a good one. Creative Assembly killed Warhammer Fantasy. Let's connect the dots, people. Let's connect the dots.
Oh, I've heard this before. All right, launch. Do it.
All right. Warhammer Fantasy ends in the year 2015. Summer of 2015, we have Age of Sigmar drop. We know that the creative cycle for creating a brand new game, usually around 3 years, give or take. That puts the timeline for the killing of Warhammer Fantasy somewhere around 2012. Of course, they probably could have written AOS in the time it took me to read that sentence. So who knows how long the development window actually was. But if I'm not mistaken, and I'm rarely mistaken, the deal with Creative Assembly was signed in the year of our Lord, 2012, approximately 3 years before the end times, almost at the exact moment that Games Workshop was probably making the decision to kill fantasy. So, did Creative Assembly know that fantasy was going to be killed? And if they did they think that was a good thing? And if they didn't, do you think they were pissed?
Yeah. Fair.
I mean, yeah, I can only imagine they were upset about it.
I mean,
but I think that they had some true believers on their development team, and that's why the game continued to push excellence, and like the delivered product was amazing.
Well, exactly right. Like, it's not like they produced a flop because of this. It's been hugely successful despite of this.
Right.
You say sorry, you're saying Total War has been successful despite of the fact that it got blown up?
Total War Warhammer has been the most. Is it the most successful of the Total War games, or is it like top 3? I can't remember.
Somebody War games almost certainly. Yeah, almost certainly. It's got the incredibly successful. I've played almost all of them, but yeah.
Question, Danny. If you were to play a game of 8th edition tomorrow, what faction is it? What's your list look like?
Oh yeah, it's Dark Elves. Probably be playing the same. Probably be playing the same kind of, or maybe Wood Elves. I don't know. I had a really good Wood Elf list at the end of 8th edition that I was playing a lot.
How many Raptors did you have? And did you have any Wild Riders? I loved Wild Riders.
Oh yeah, so my list was like 50 Archers, 18 Wild Riders. Like that was kind of the backbone of that list.
Yeah.
That's where all the punching comes. And then I had a Tree Man Ancient. And a little unit of like 18 Eternal Guard, a Battle Standard Bear, and a level 4. Some Eagles, some War Dancers, like some chaff. You know, gotta have some redirectors.
Gotta have it, man.
Yep. But like 30 times 10 with True Flight, and 1 times 20 with Hagmane. And those were my monster hunters. Yeah,
dude, that sounds fun. That sounds like a lot of fun. Wow. See, this is one of the beautiful things about fantasy, because like you would just have armies that would break the conventional mold. You'd have because everyone thinks about fantasy, everyone thinks about like an empire army. Essentially, they think about it has a little bit of gun, a little bit of melee, a little bit of magicalness, some cannons, some artillery, a bit of everything. But then you have the extremes that kind of eschew all that. Like you almost have an entire army of fast cav.
What else especially like, and this is actually one of the things I really love, one of the many things I love about fantasy is you've got about half as many armies in fantasy, I think, as you do as modern 40k, give or take. I mean, we could count them, but I'd say that's roughly true. And I would say, as far as data slates are concerned, you probably have about a third of the total amount of data slates. So you have like way fewer units, way fewer armies. So the armies and the units themselves have a lot more fidelity. So like they do feel very different. And like the armies that are a bit of a black box to me are certainly Dark Elves and High Elves. I haven't really dabbled in that, but Wood Elves actually bullied someone into selling me a bunch for cheap. And they are a completely different army than any of the other ones. And if you try and play Wood Elves like you would play any other fantasy army, you would just get absolutely shellacked with them.
So Ogre Kingdoms has 24 data sheets in it. 24 units in it. 10 of those are HQs, essentially are lords and heroes. So 14, you have 14 units upon which to build the whole of your army. Also, I will say one thing I've always wanted in 40k. I wanted a competitive format that had the points restrictions like fantasy did, where you had to have a minimum amount of troops in your army. You had to, and you could have a maximum amount of elites. And I thought this was something they could have done instead of the rule of 3 at the start in the middle of 8th edition.
And like, don't forget too that fantasy self-comped itself like really hard, and like Swedish comp and like other things, like even the base rule set and not allowing special characters was very, very common.
This is something very germane, maybe to the interests of whoever out there is clinging on to this episode. And I appreciate all of you. You are the true believers, and you're going to come with me on this journey. I appreciate it. Get your fantasy armies now for cheap before the old world comes and ruins everything. Now,
just kidding.
Warhammer Fantasy's competitive. It will ruin everything. There's no doubt about it. 8th edition doesn't change. 8th edition doesn't change. It is the same today as it was 7 years ago, and I love that. I love that I don't get stressed out about changes. If I get bored, I change my army. My army doesn't change. It's awesome. Regardless, this is what I was going to say. Something that I think is really fascinating is, one, how many of, I don't know, some of the more prominent or certainly engaged 40K competitive players I came to find out are in fact dyed-in-the-wool competitive fantasy players. The original ETC was fundamentally a Warhammer Fantasy tournament. Yep. The other thing is that the competitive scene, especially in the United States and probably elsewhere, was a lot more developed. You had a Masters system with qualifiers that were all across the continent. You had stratification of competitive events, and you had community comps that were just expected.
Yep.
So like it was expected that the tournament game was a modified version of what you got out of the box. And it seemed like, I don't know how they all got along or how that worked. Like Adam rattled off a couple. There was Swedish comp. I'm sure there was an Australian comp of some kind.
We played Swedish. Yeah.
We played Swedish. There's ETC had its own version of comp.
Yep.
And by the way, comp, really unlike some of the stuff that you saw in 40K in previous editions, comp had a wide degree of latitudes. You had situations where they were giving points, were taking points from armies. They were limiting unit selections. They were changing the way things worked. So why was that competitive community so different than what we saw in 40K, which was this really fractured? You can't change the game. You're messing with the game. It was handed to us by Moses. We can't change the word. That kind of stuff.
It was wild, dude. So at the ETC level, like at the WTC level equivalent of fantasy, Beastmen played with 2,400 points. No, 2,400 points was the standard. They played with 2,700 points.
Yeah.
In a 2,400 point game. And
Tomb Kings were like that too.
2,600 points. Yeah. Yep. In a 2,400 point game. They just got more points because their army was just shit. Could you imagine trying to do that in 40K at the moment? Sorry, you've been playing Imperial Guard with the same codex for 5 years. It's about to get a new one now, but you have 2,200 points in your army. They would burn down the world. The 40K players would not stand for any of that crap.
You'd be shouted off of the internet. You would be 100%. Using a rotary phone because you would just be banned from any form of advanced communication.
It was wild. The pickup, right, of this comp system, like universally accepted almost. And of course, you've got people that railed against that stuff. Like, I want to play comp Warhammer Fantasy. And those tournaments did happen in some places, but they were the exception and not the rule, almost certainly in most.
End times happened, and
right.
Eventually all the comp went out the window. It was the game started on a downward trajectory that moved too fast for the comp systems to really, apart from banning the Law of Undeath completely, because that let everybody summon essentially,
which was
that was just. Let's just not talk about that. And so everyone just agreed not to do that. But then everything got crazy ass busted, and the comp couldn't catch up. So eventually, like my last couple of events felt almost like they were uncomped.
But like before that, though, I think just more in general, like the competitive games seemed to have be sentient. Like it realized that like in order to make the game more playable and consistent, they had to make changes. Do you think that was there specific leadership? Like how did people in Sweden have the credibility to, or the authority to make a system that was accepted by others?
I'm going to talk to something in the chat because people are saying that they're doing this in 40K right now anyway, with Guard having free upgrades on squads, Death Guard free upgrades on squads. Very different from the proprietor and the game designer doing it to some arbitrary body somewhere in Europe doing it and expecting you to adopt it nationwide. That's what we're talking about. If G-Dub was doing this stuff, absolutely no one would have complained. And and what we're surprised about is the fact that some arbitrary guys in Sweden decided to slap this comp system together, and we just all picked it up and thought this is fine, let's do it.
And that in itself is part of the reason why we didn't see like sales improve, and I think as a large part of it is just because there was no updates to this game. I remember T-shirts saying "GW, we just don't give a feck," like were really common, and like a lot of, I know a lot of fans
mid-cycle, so like for folks, mid-cycle in Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition is when GW picked up their balls and screw you guys, we're going home. So it was, you have FAQs at the beginning of the edition, where like you get actual answers and like questions and errata. By the end of the edition, that's not really happening very consistently or as much. And also they're adopting more of a, just throw the stuff out, everyone else figures it out. And maybe that's where it comes from. But even something like the US Masters system, like there's nothing stopping us from doing that right now. Right. You know what I mean? So
it's a shame that we don't have that. It really is.
Also, I'm gonna say, if you think team play for 40k is cool, team play for fantasy was my boys. Oh, it was the next level.
Why is that? Why?
Did you ever play many, Danny? You want to take it?
Well, it was always my dream to go to Masters. And living in Alaska, it was very hard for me to qualify. But ETC, and that level of play, and the armies being so different, and then building these SKU lists that had like a million pieces of chaff in it and stuff like that you would go up against something like, Chaos Warriors or Warriors of Chaos, and then they just couldn't score any points. You wouldn't kill anything of them, but you would hold them to
redirect
a 10-10 or a 9-11 or like a 8-12, and that would be exactly what you're supposed to do.
So you talk about 40k at the moment, and also at the WTC level, you've got to have 8 unique lists, unique factions. For a game that moves as quickly as 8th and 9th edition has, it's actually been pretty easy to find the 5 or 6 that everyone's probably going to take every year. It's been pretty easy to identify, and that's as a player of that event. Me trying to figure out what everyone's going to take, usually I'm pretty right about 5 or 6 of them. Fantasy, as long as you were taking the best 1 or 2 factions, everything else could be whatever the crap you wanted. And at the end of it would have been usually probably it was High Elves, Dark Elves, so the top 2, or High Elves, Lizardmen, depending on what the player you had. But then you could take Tomb Kings if you had a good enough player, because they had enough points that if you had a good enough player, because they were playing with 300 more points than everybody else, that good enough player could bridge the gap and was just an X factor no one could account for. And stuff like that just came to the fore so much more. In addition, I think one of the biggest reasons fantasy died was because of the design choices of 8th edition. They blew the size of an army out so far that it became so prohibitively ridiculous for a new player to try and make an army.
So at the same time, I find a lot of that stuff to be sort of straw man, because you can do unit fillers. There are ways around there's no reason, and unit fillers, for those people who don't understand, you have a big square of infantry. When you got to Warhammer 8th edition, you didn't have to, but a very dominant mode was to bring very large bricks of infantry. 40 models plus would be common, and it could get crazy. You could have a 100 goblin unit, you could have 100 Skaven slaves. Sure. That's 100 models, 1 unit, and maybe multiples of those. And yes, at the extreme ends, that could be the case. You could also play ogres and not do that, for the record. But anyway,
exactly what I did, because I couldn't afford another army.
What I was saying about unit fillers is that you could also just have a diorama in the middle of your unit that looks cool as shit, gives a ton of flavor, and then you don't have to paint 15 extra models because you got something cool in the middle of your model. There's ways around this that, again, it just feels hollow, that that's the reason why.
You want to play? You know what I mean? Do you want to play the meta Skaven list, my dude? Do you want to?
I did.
So describe the meta Skaven list.
How many Skaven slaves did you actually have, Danny? How many unit fillers and how many Skaven slaves?
Oh, so I had no unit fillers, my friend. I dipped this army in a month, and it was the worst month of my life.
Hey, how many was it? Was it the 150 that everyone had? 3 by 50?
Yeah. I had. No, I guess I only had 120. I think I had 6 by 20. Skaven slaves, and then a bunch of clan rats. I think I had like 3 or 4
Couple of
units of
bunkers.
those at 25s, and then so it's like it was like a 300 model army easy.
Ooh. I mean, tell little Timmy when he walks into the shop, oh, you bought your first box of Skaven and you love Skaven, you have to get, checks notes, 14 more of those before you can play this game. That's what I'm talking about. And you're absolutely right. Once you get developed and you're in the game enough, you're immersed in it, you learn these things about unit fillers, you learn the quarters you can cut. But for little Tummy walking into a G-Dub, that G-Dub player guy is not going to tell him about unit fillers. That G-Dub guy is going to say, you have to buy every damn box, son. I'm going to teach you how to paint them. Here are the paints you can buy. And that was the brick wall that bounced everyone off. I believe.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of players. It started stopping new players coming in.
Yeah, I guess too. Like, I don't know. I look at like some model, like some armies that I've run in 40k, and 100%. Like my orc armies were all up well over 100 models, and like I had to move every individual one of those stupid things.
Yeah, dude.
You know, so like actually, like I think under 150 was impressive when I was running orcs in 8th edition. That was when I switched. Like, I only got below 150 when I switched to mega knobs and stuff, right? So like. The model count thing is really, to me, is if that's the army you want to go to, you can do model count in either system, and I don't think you had to necessarily play a high model count army in fantasy.
You don't,
and
have
like
to.
even the best, even like so like the best armies. Like how many models would you have in a high elves army?
About 100 wounds worth of models, I would say.
100 wounds, depending on what you had. You'd usually have you'd have your sword masters, you had your Phoenix Guard with all your characters in it. You'd have usually 2 or 3 units of fast cav, a couple of bolt throwers.
Maybe some dragon princes, some eagles.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So I don't know. That doesn't really make me blink. You know, like I don't know if 100 models.
As bougie Val the adult, sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, are kids playing this game? You know, I don't know. I was at a 40k event. I didn't see a lot of friggin' like 8-year-olds playing Warhammer 40k. You know what I'm saying?
But that was.
I honestly think it was more of a reaction from like the 5th edition 40k guys and the 6th and 7th edition fantasy guys, because the same thing was happening in 40k, which is like model army sizes were going up,
increasing,
and they like both games were revolting against that.
Well,
and
actually,
I don't know. I think fantasy gets painted with that brush because it had some extremes, but like you didn't have to play it that way.
Well, I had guys who played all the way through 7th edition telling me they needed to add literal almost 50% onto their armies to play the same army from edition to edition. That might be an extreme case.
And so here's part of the problem with that. And Adam, you're 100% correct, right? But part of the problem was that there was a shifting goalpost for fantasy for the size of a tournament army. Like wherein it started closer to 2000, like 2150, and it rose to 2,500 points. And so, yeah, the extra 400 points, and it compounded with cheaper units, just means, like 50% additional units in an army was not uncommon from 7th to 8th.
Yeah, to play pretty much the same thing. And yeah, people, I mean, I don't know. I'm just going to say it right now. A lot more cheapskates in 40k in fantasy than 40k, just straight up. Just of the people I knew, maybe Aussies, maybe there may be more higher percentage because we're Australians. We pay more, per the buck for the plastic. But yeah, I like so many more unit fillers. So many once I got to the level, people wanted to try and not chase the meta, but constantly have an adapting army, because very few people chase the meta in fantasy. It was a ridiculous task, and very few people bothered. Well, and there wasn't really much point because you got maybe you got a codex every 3 months. Like I remember the
not
last,
even. It was the last year. It's the last year where you get a bunch. You get all the elves.
Yeah, the dwarves.
But I mean, the game drops in 2010, and I'd say half the books dropped in the last 2 years, probably.
Yeah.
So
it's probably 2 books a year. On average,
and so there was nothing to chase. You just adapted your army as best you could, and it wasn't any point to go after the dragon, so to speak. But because of that, you got a lot more faction specialists. You got a lot of people who knew a lot more about their faction.
Yep.
Like I used to love people just talking about the little 100-point changes they make tournament to tournament because of the thing they beat them at the last one. And I used to those are some of the best cooler talks I'd have. And then I had the same chats in 40k, and people talking about I just won't take demons next time. I'll take a completely different army. I'm like,
right.
Do you have the army's like, oh, I'll borrow it or print it or, steal it from a mate, or I'll just run out and buy it with my money. And I'll be like, oh my God, they're in your veins. Good for you. I mean, good for you if you can afford to do it. That would bring me so much joy being able to play the game like that. But it's just not what tickled my fancy.
Yeah, and 5 or 6 units at 20 models a unit, is a lot harder to hit that hobby lag that it takes to actually build to the meta. So I think, yeah, it just you could not catch it unless you already had the models built. So you were building like 30 models in a unit for your stuff, and then you'd parse that out and try and make the best list you could.
I would love to do with like yourself, Danny, maybe Pete, some others, try and do a end
Thanks, Adam.
sorry, what?
Nothing. No, continue. You guys go. No, it's just cool.
Do a pre-end times tier list for fantasy.
Well, let's jump into it right now, because actually, this came up in chat, and I would love to do this before end times tier list, because I'm about as knowledgeable of fantasy as I probably was approaching what I ever was at 40K, which is to say, advanced idiot. Okay, so I've got a pretty good generalist grasp, and I have a general feeling that there are a couple like alpha predators, but for the most part, everything else, there's like a really big squishy middle in fantasy. This is the way I feel. So I feel like S tier kind of matters in fantasy, whereas in 40K it's not necessarily. S isn't as separate as I perceive fantasy to be. Here you go, guys. Give me an S, A, and a B.
Danny, you play most of them.
An
S, A, and a B tier for armies. That's what you
want. Or an S and an A. Give me an S and an A. Who makes the S and the A cut?
High elves is S.
Yeah, so I think you've got I think all 3 elves make S and A tiers easily, because they were all just phenomenal at what they were supposed to do.
I do believe that wood elves needed the pilot though. High elves you can smash.
Wood elves are nothing. Yeah, they're like A tier, but they can be S tier if they're played by a really competent player.
I love that shit.
Yeah, because
so you would say pretty much all elves in the S tier. So it's your wood, your dark, and your high. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else in there? Anyone else really up there? Like Nurgle demons seem like I don't understand how anyone could beat Nurgle demons. They seem fucked.
Nah, I'd smash them.
Yeah, dude.
Smash them. You smash them. You smash them.
Like combat.
They get all the buffs. Yeah. They got some fat guy riding on a palanquin, giving everyone everything, and you can just smash them.
They are so prone to being redirected. They are so prone.
And they don't have any.
They got no chaff clearers and they're slow. So you just make them hit your chaff, charge them with a big unit in the flank. Doesn't even have to kill them. You'll just break them. You'll just
win by combat res and attrition them down. Hope they don't roll double ones for their break test and get all their guys back.
Okay, so I'll return to the question. Anyone outside of elves, by the way, guys, this is as good of analysis as you're gonna get. I've listened to all of it.
Yeah,
anyone outside of elves in the S tier of 8th edition pre-end times?
I disagree with Danny. I think high elves might have been the only S tier army in my meta.
Oh, come on.
Might have been the only S, but there's 4 contenders outside the elves that could all be there, all be in the A+ tier.
Okay.
That's lizards, vampires, dwarves, and empire.
Holy shit. Never in my life would I hear anyone say that. Never. Never.
Lizardmen could be the most oppressive crap you've ever imagined if they go first and get all the buffs. Buffs.
I agree about Lizardmen. Lizardmen were amazing. Great spell casting, amazing skirmishers.
I don't know about S tier.
Meta beating.
I'm talking A tier, mate. A tier.
Oh no, okay. So you're saying wood elves, high elves alone in the S tier. This is what you said.
Debatably dark elves could be S tier. I don't think wood elves. Generally, without a phenomenal player, I don't think they are. I think they're just an A tier army. But Danny's here to
me, that makes it an A tier army. I think S tier means you got to be able to basically beat anyone without being that good.
Dwarves in
Can
A tier.
I win?
Dwarves in A tier because they're the unfunamaker. They were literally the unfunamaker. That new codex that they got was just like, did you want to have fun? You paired into dwarves, brother. I'm sorry, you're not gonna
happen.
You're gonna spend 4 turns marching at me as I redirect you with gyrocopters, and when you get here, you're gonna charge unbreakable, stubborn, great weapon, freaking hammerers who are actually just gonna beat you in combat. So why didn't I just come at you? Because I'm dwarves and I can't be bothered. Literally, that's that game, and it was so frustrating, at times.
Yep.
So dwarves are a great one. You want
To
to go
answer
another one?
to answer John's question in chat here, for the record, guys, my fantasy baptism was diving headlong into a line of unbreakable dwarves about 5 or 6 times
Yeah.
and losing every single one. Those are the only times Sticky ever beat me.
So
Continue.
I think the end of 8th edition pre-end times had a thick A and B plus band. I think
That's the way it
genuinely did.
feels. It feels like I could pick up about any army off my shelf, and like it feels like I could have a good time with almost all of them.
All right. So, but like Tomb Kings,
with the exception of these,
yeah,
Bretonnia.
Yeah,
Tomb Kings, Beastmen, Bretonnia. That's the bottom of the barrel.
The sad part about that list is that of those 3, only Tomb Kings actually had an 8th edition book. The other 2 basically never got published.
And I argue that book was worse than the Bretonian book, which was over a decade old at the onset of 8th edition.
But Skaven were still an amazing army, and they
7th edition
book.
I know. I'm just trying to. I'm like Skaven. I find it really hard to quantify how good Skaven was. If all the crap works, they're as bad as Lizardmen. If none of the crap works, they're as bad as Beastmen. Like it was such a wide band of what could possibly happen when you played them. But when everything so we joked about it in the green room that you would play an orc army and you would structure it really well to have black orc guys here to stop all the animosity, and it's all in concert. Even if you do have that animosity, you're not going to wreck any of your other units by squabbling with them, and you'd have little units between all the big units and stuff like that. And
Orcs, for the record, had a special rule that punished their army as opposed to helping their army. Classic GW design philosophy. Continuing, Adam.
And their army would still fall apart like half of every game. They would have just their army just wouldn't work because of frenzy, stupidity, or animosity. Something would just happen. And then you'd have army like Skaven.
Also, like, I have to say, as a guy with a lot of orcs in his closet, it feels like a horde of orcs, and you're trying to get these dumbasses to do what you want them to do, and they just won't can do it. And it's amazing in that way.
Then they'll just die because they didn't do the thing, and because they're already a fragile leadership army, pretty much.
Sometimes they just go off as well, which is also incredible.
You know what the worst thing imaginable was? When you had your big orc, so your savage orc biggins, which was an upgrade you used to be able to put on orcs, like you used to be able to put on in 40k, and you'd also have your black orcs, and you would just be like, if I can just make it to the dwarves, I reckon I can crack them. Yeah. And then turn 4, you're about to charge. Animosity o'clock, bitches! Organ gun fires again, game's over.
GG.
But the Skaven thing was right. If you min-maxed it, if you min-maxed those percentages of it, it messing you up down to the slimmest margin, and everything went off. Like you got your cracks core off, which was like a template, or everything under it's dead. Dreaded 13th, which was just pick a unit and do was it strength test or toughness test, or it might have even been an initiative test. Can't remember, but it was
everything's dead.
Unit. Everything's dead. And then you had the Doom Rocket, which was a strength 5 large blast. Large blast, just by the way, was so hard to come by.
No. You just rolled a number of dice and they lost that many models. That's how Dreaded 13th works.
Dreaded 13th,
oh, yeah.
But the Doom Rocket was you had to pick a number of dice, and you had to roll that many dice. And if that meant you hit the target unit, you just laid the template of the large blast wherever it ended. And so it was just like taking the chance on the dice. But you could wait until they were in minimum safe distance and just blow it right in their face and blow up a whole unit. And it was a strength 5 large blast, which essentially in 40k terms means it was rend 2 to their armor save. So if you had a 3 up, you had a 5 up, and a 3 up, by the way, was very hard to come by. You had to have full plate, and then a horse and shields to have a 3+. And even that was very rare. A strength 5 instant gives anything that doesn't have heavy armor at a minimum.
It was brutal.
It was brutal. So Skaven's even hard to quantify, and they had an old dex.
Yeah.
So basically, what we're saying here is that you could pick up almost any army in fantasy, and you could make an army out of it. You can make a go of it.
Correct. But I think like I said, I think there's those 4 armies directly under the tippy top best that just felt oppressive in the right hands. That being dwarves, vampires, lizards, and Empire. Empire's another one to unpack.
Wow.
It could be that
they get to do everything.
Yeah, and they can do everything great if you give it enough time and points. and play it well enough. They were truly like what I wish Space Marines were. Like Space Marines are a bit of a joke in the game at the moment. They don't really do anything well. They don't shoot as good as Tau. They don't fight as good as anybody else.
Here's actually an interesting so as a guy who just played Empire, an army, like a fucking net listed the German ETC, actually reached out to the guy who wrote it and said thank you. German ETC list from 2015. And basically it's like a bunch of like buffing units, and then you're like your halberd dudes are in front of it, and you're basically your magic and your religiosity, your priests yelling at your troops make your like regular bros swing and hit harder. And this isn't really all that different from the mechanic that you see in some like Imperial Guard. And I realized like, oh, that's exactly where that came from. Yeah. So like this the concept of, wait a minute, humans in this context are just bros. They're going to die. We have to find a way to make them better than that. But in the 40K context, like my sergeant yelling at me doesn't feel like it's going to like it doesn't feel like it makes sense that suddenly I can run as fast as a Space Marine because like my NCO is pissed. Whereas in this, I have a righteous magical priest hitting a giant anvil with like friggin' lightning bolts coming out of it. That to me is like I can see them being imbued by magic or fervor, and like that to me like it hangs together a little bit better in this context than it does in like a sci-fi one.
You're just a fantasy boy. What can I say?
Yeah.
It was great, man. It was great. I'm not gonna lie. And like the battle line, the epic, the cinema. Again, 40K can be very cinematic, but like on the fact that most fantasy tables are empty, for the most part, like there's just not a lot of stuff on there aside from the armies, and like the vividness of the battles in my head is really cool. It's like every game is like Braveheart, you know, like you know it's just really it's a lot of fun. I've been having a lot of fun.
It's a pretty freeing as well. I think about those games back then when you could just play a game with your mates on a table with your pepper shaker, and you're good to go. You know, whereas now, how much I need a mat, I need a table, I need. Oh, geez, right. It feels like close to $1,000 worth of terrain for a game. It's just kind of nuts.
Think of maybe fantasy would have survived had the Frontline Gaming mat, which you can buy at frontlinegaming.org, existed.
Bang, bang,
you know how satisfying it is just moving like friggin' war game shuffleboard? It's just so satisfying moving across those neoprene mats with those beautiful graphical designs that you can buy at frontlinegaming.org if you use the link in the description. But also that's very true. All right, so I want to we got to wrap it up because we've been wanking for some time. 40 combined so you know. Viewers hanging in there, by the way, guys. Really pleased with everyone.
I want everyone to know this has been the most self-indulgent podcast I've ever been on.
It's great.
I'm real happy about it. What's the meme of Mo with two knives? This is
Okay, so to wrap it up, everyone is looking forward to Old World, obviously, and we're going to corner the market on dozens of viewing opportunities by talking Old World, and we're going to corner it all. But in the meantime, just off the cuff here, do either of you actually look forward to Old World coming out? Like, will you guys play it when it comes?
Yes.
Yeah, I want a supported product.
Yes.
And this is exactly what I want. Like, I am super excited. I might quit playing 40K. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I'm like Homer backing up into the hedge from 40K, possibly when fantasy drops. No, I'm not. I'm in too deep. But I will be playing the absolute shit.
Turns out you can just put all your 40K shit in a box and leave it in the shed. That's what I did.
But I will be playing the hell out of fantasy. In fact, this Tomb King's army, if I don't get the oomph to play it, I might turn that into whatever army I play for fantasy. I might flip that and be like, I'm going to buy a car, a holiday, and a new army.
Hell yeah.
I'm just saying, Adam, you know, I moonlight as an investments professional at times. And I'm just gonna suggest strongly that perhaps, you know, like people who were holding Bitcoin, you know, 6 months ago, that, you know, if, as rumors suggest, Tomb Kings might be the launch army and they have modern nice models you can just buy in a store,
Who wants any?
Perhaps that new and shrink premium won't be quite as high in those.
Have you seen the quality of these horses?
They're not
Have you
quality.
seen? Shush you.
Have you seen their mold lines? Like, have you looked at any
Yes.
recently? It's real bad.
I
Stop
implore you, sir.
Stop devaluing my gold bullion.
I am valuing it, in
diamond
fact,
hand
quite
Camilleri over
accurately,
here.
I would say. Please, for the love of God, sell all of that stuff before it's too late, because I'm guessing. Danny, your thoughts? Anything? Any thoughts on Old World? Any hopes or dreams?
Oh,
Any
I'm
hopes or dreams?
excited. I mean, obviously, we hope for the old models are compatible with it and all that stuff. I mean, we'll see what it looks like. I hope that it lives up to the hype, because they've been trying real hard to make it really appeal to us old fantasy guys here, I think.
Well, there's been no hype. In fact, they literally released an article with 4 pictures. They were very nice pictures, I will say that. But it was literally just 4 pictures, not even of models, of an artist's interpretation of models.
Enough for me.
I am simmering,
enough.
but I require more. Yeah, I require more.
I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. I'm so ready. I'm so ready.
I'm ready. I'm ready to have friends to play with. You know, Tech Priest Dickie's cool and all, and traveling to Rochester to meet the 8th Ed for Life guys was great and all. But
I'm coming to Toronto to play in Dustin's Stud or Snotling. We're gonna.
No,
play
you're
some
coming to
fantasy.
my house to play fantasy. That's what you're doing.
See, and I'm just so happy the major is happening.
Thanks for telling me.
Exactly right.
The major is right here in the casita. Now, free room and board. My son is really cute. You'll enjoy yourself. I even have ogres I can get ready for you. Although I don't have any of the stupid little green guys.
I will play anything. I do not care. I'm like,
I've got a lot more than anything. Not gonna lie to you. Not gonna lie to you.
Man, would I
like
even play
Lawrence
elves?
Baker's cabinets back over here. What?
Would I play elves? I'm not sure if I'm desperate enough to play elves, but if they were in front of me, I might. Yeah.
Is there a Toronto fantasy group I'd join? Zip Zap Rap. There's one on Facebook, but that's about it. And you can also just play me. I'm pretty much the meta right now, guys, when it comes to 8th edition. Because for some reason in Toronto, everyone's like, nah, man, we play a 6th edition. Okay, cool, I guess. Why?
6th is...
We're always like this in Toronto. You can't have nice things. Why can't you just play the right thing?
If you were going to grognard for a dead game, like, just do something obscure. Just like, why, you know?
I mean, there are 5th edition homers too. So like that's special stuff. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate you indulging me in this Warhammer Fantasy digression that took I'd say about an hour and 10 minutes. Pretty good time there. That was a pretty good time. John, thanks for being ill.
Dude, our tier list is just coalescing. Like we could just
we could talk about it for hours, man.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
I find that the top of your A tier I found fascinating, to be quite frank. And you know what? Peter Colosimo would probably disagree with you vehemently, I think, about your tier list.
Beautiful.
I find it fascinating that I've asked you guys all separately for fantasy advice over the months, and every time I ask you the same question, I get 3 different answers, which is wild. You would not get that in 40K. If I were to ask you guys a 40K question, which I wouldn't, but in the event that I would get probably something very close to the same answer every time. I get different answers every time I ask a question, so it's kind of neat.
I just think that's indicative of how different the metas were in different regions. Really think it was.
That's
like,
true.
I mean, I had a super terrifying beastman player. Beastmen were not respected the world over, but I had an absolute juggernaut of a beastman player. I used to club everybody, and because of that, I just had this weird perspective on beastmen.
There you go. No, Beastmen actually did suck. Don't think that was something that you. They were terrible.
Just if you want proof, go and watch any of the Once Bitten's battle reports. Watch how well he does with his Empire, and then watch how well he does with his Beastmen. I actually watched some of those 360
Canadian Warhammer
royalty,
competitive Warhammer royalty guy. Who's the other one? Once Bitten and
Mr. Malorian, but he ditched to go to War Machine.
Mr. Malorian, yes, Mr. Malorian. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for putting up with my sweater. Danny, Adam, thank you for the awesome chats. You guys are awesome. Go ahead. One more. What was that? One more.
We
Slide
should
one
do
more.
The whole
more.
crew, all the fantasy guys. We should jump in on one of the Mountain Miniatures live streams, fantasy live streams. We should just be in a Discord watching
Just destroy
that.
them?
No, we should just watch and just chat while they're playing. It'd be nice.
Okay.
I mean,
Anyway,
that
I
is
gotta
kind
go.
of what they want.
I gotta go. It's like
well, we all
3:30.
gotta go. You keep talking.
It's my fault. I'm apologizing.
That's all right. We love to hear it. We love to see you guys. Thank you, everyone. It's been pretty grim after dark.
Yeah.